Crystal, why don't you set the scene for where you are right now, the security around you, who is and what is around you as Donald Trump gets set to land.
Heather, I just turned around to see if I can get a peek of anything in the sky. I can't see it from this perspective, but we can see that U.S. President Donald Trump's chopper is in the air. We understand that other American dignitaries who are here for this unprecedented second state visit already on the ground, including U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the American Treasurer, as well as the peace envoy Steve Witkoff. Now, if we can read anything into those individuals, it really does set the scene for the importance, what the UK and the royal family is hoping to accomplish with this state visit, this very impressive state visit that will start to unfold over the next couple of minutes. They are trying to impress Donald Trump. He is a very big fan of the royals. When he landed, he talked about, King Charles being a good old friend of his. He was impressed when he was handed the invitation several months ago by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And so you will see a lot of military pageantry. We know that the American president enjoys seeing that. So you will see the household cavalry that will be coming together, 1,300 troops, 120 horses. There'll be 3 different bands. It'll be the first time ever in recent memory anyway, according to UK defense officials, that there will be American and UK fighter jets participating in a fly past. And to give a sense of just how much they are rolling out the red carpet for the U.S. president here, Heather, later this week on the 19th, for the first time in history, American military bands will take place in the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. So there is an effort to impress the U.S. president, to make him feel welcome. And of course, this all has to do with the UK trying to win over Donald Trump, trying to make sure that they can control anything when it comes to the economy and tariffs, come up with other, science and energy deals. And then, of course, those other big issues. Talk about the war in Ukraine. Talk about putting more pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin. Talk about the war in Gaza. And we know that those are all issues that are also important to King Charles and the royal family. We've seen royals in Ukraine, although, Prince Harry, not a working royal, he was just in the capital the other day. So this will be a grand event, and it will start in moments from now when we see the U.S. president's helicopter land, him walk out, and then those carriage processions will begin, the inspections of the guards, the band will play, and also interesting, we won't see any of it from this side of the castle grounds, all taking place on the grounds, that protective structure inside of Windsor Castle, Heather.
Crystal, thank you. I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. Crystal Gomansing at the gates. I just want to show you the band, one of the 3 Crystal mentioned. We have them set to arrive to greet. This is the band of the household cavalry, and take note of their state dress. This was designed in the 17th century, made from pure gold thread. So perhaps, again, the gilded greeting will be something that is appealing to the U.S. president. They're arriving ahead of the arrival of President Trump and Melania Trump, but we do see the helicopter getting a little bit closer, and we will show you as they land. They will be greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales, so William and Kate in those capacities officially here. As we're watching this, I'm going to we have a number of guests for you over the next half hour, just to bring you some particular perspectives on what we're seeing and why we're seeing this play out today. And joining us is Professor Scott Lucas, and I want to say good morning to him as he's watching. Great to see you, Professor. We couldn't have an event in the UK without your take on it, so welcome back to us on CBC Morning Live. Listen, Crystal was just setting out. It's going to be a lot of pomp and pageantry. We've talked a lot about how that is so appealing to Donald Trump. So there is pomp, but there may well be politics. And how might that all be used for diplomacy today?
Well, I think, Heather, the best way for me to answer that is Trump's primarily there for ego and for status. But from the UK side, the UK government, this is damage limitation. And I probably would identify 3 issues to keep your eyes on. One is that the UK is still facing these Trump tariffs. Now, at a minimum, that's 10% tariffs. And while that hurts Americans first and foremost, it does hurt. But that trade framework, which was announced months ago, has not become a trade deal. So the U.S., the Trump administration, still has 25% tariffs on UK steel and aluminium, and they've threatened tariffs on UK pharmaceuticals. So the Starmer government wants to try to push that back. I don't think we'll get a trade deal announced this week, but they'll at least want to keep this in terms of a positive approach. Secondly, Trump's chaos on foreign policy is something that the UK government's going to try to contain. That's especially true about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where Trump spins like a weather vane. And remember that the invitation for the state visit was part of the effort in February by Keir Starmer and European leaders to prevent the Trump folks from going AWOL on European as well as Ukrainian security. And then thirdly, an issue which hasn't got as much play, but keep your eyes open for this, is not necessarily Donald Trump publicly, but the Trump camp are working with the opposition Reform Party in the UK. Now, this is a hard right party, some would even say far right, led by a man named Nigel Farage, who has worked for Donald Trump, worked for both of Donald Trump's campaigns. Over months, the Trump administration has been promoting the Reform Party, including on the Reform Party's national TV stations in the UK. And a few weeks ago, J.D. Vance, when he supposedly was on vacation in England, was meeting leaders of the Reform Party, as well as some conservatives, in the Cotswolds. Starmer government does not want this Trump visit to be promoting reform at their expense, even though there will be certain UK news outlets that will definitely be trying to do that.
Professor, just stay with us. Well, it's interesting on that point. There was the huge demonstration in the heart of London on the weekend, about 100,000 protesters on the right. And that has been really the subject of a much discussion, what that might be signaling right now, the largest protest of its sort in decades. So we'll talk about that. Scott Lucas is going to be with us here on CBC Morning Live, watching and offering some perspective. I also want to bring in, as we await the arrival of U.S. President Trump, and we can see the scene at Windsor Castle. Rafe Haydel-Mancou is with me, royal historian and broadcaster. And Rafe, it's good to see you again and have you as part of yet another royal moment. As you get set to watch this scene unfold, I'm wondering what you'll be paying particular attention to today.
Well, in terms of purely the spectacle and the ceremony, this is a state visit like no other. Firstly, of course, this is the only time that we've accorded a state visit 2 times to anybody, let alone to a president. That's, of course, because President Trump's terms weren't continuous. There was a break in between, and there's now a new monarch. But actually, there have only ever been 4 presidents who have had a state visit. One was Obama, two were Donald Trump, and George W. Bush. So actually, this is a very rare honor, and we're going to see, as a result of that, the British state really pulling out all of its pomp and pageantry to give President Trump what he wants, which is a photo opportunity. He's desperate to be seen with the royal family. He's a great monarchist. That was imbued in him through his mother, of course, who was Scottish and a great monarchist. And he still talks about his previous state visits as one of the highlights of his presidential career. If that's what we need to do in Britain in order to secure great trade deals and also perhaps push the president more strongly on issues like Russia and China, as well as in Gaza, then so be it. But we're going to see the first ever UK-US military fly past in a state visit. We're going to have the largest guard of honor ever seen in a state visit. The first time that the Beating the Retreat ceremony has been performed at a state visit later this afternoon. And also a US military band will be taking part in the Changing the Guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace for the first time in history in a couple of days. So again, this is a momentous event for all sorts of reasons.
Scale and spectacle, as you say, unprecedented. Again, the helicopters set to bring in Donald Trump from London. He and the First Lady arrived last night and set to touch down in Windsor in just a matter of moments. I want to ask you, it was quite a moment in February when Keir Starmer, Rafe, handed that envelope and extended the invitation to Donald Trump for that never before offered second state visit, and how he lit up at all of that. And the intent of all of that, King Charles, this is his sixth state visit that he has hosted. I'm wondering, his mother was, we know, the master of soft power. So exerting her influence through soft power to further diplomatic ends. Is King Charles similar in that regard?
Similar and more so, I would say. Her Majesty the Queen was far more discreet about raising issues. The King isn't quite cast in the same mould, although he's not quite as interventionist as he might have been when he was Prince of Wales. Britain still ranks as the world's #2 soft power nation, and a large part of that is because of the soft power of the monarchy, something, of course, that we share with Canada and Australia and the other realms too. And the King does use these opportunities to raise issues. Now, we do think, we don't know, of course, what he's going to talk about, but there have been talks about perhaps he'll raise the issue of energy and the environment with Donald Trump. Obviously, those are two issues upon which the two leaders diverge considerably, but there is some warmth in that relationship. The King first met Donald Trump back in 1988 when he traveled to Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, which Donald Trump had just purchased a few years earlier. They have had an exchange of correspondence in the years since then. The King wrote to him after his assassination attempt last year, and Melania, in her memoirs, said that she enjoys a correspondence with the royal family, as does Donald Trump. So there is some warmth there, some basis upon which to build a constructive framework for discussions.
When he was invited for this second state visit back in February, he said, "A beautiful man, a wonderful man," was his description of of King Charles. Here is the landing of the helicopter on the lawn of Windsor Castle on those grounds. And Rafe, just one quick question. It's interesting as we watch and we follow the state visit. Canada, of course, can't have a state visit because King Charles would be doing the inviting, and King Charles is Canada's king. So it is for states outside the Commonwealth, of course, so Canada can never be accorded this honor.
Yes, well, more specifically, outside of the Commonwealth realms. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, we all share the same monarch, so we can't have a state visit. And of course, it's for the same reason that we don't exchange ambassadors with each other. We exchange high commissioners. Here we see US Marine One, which is the president's helicopter landing. Worthy of note that when an American president travels anywhere, all of his transport is basically American run. Arrived on Air Force One, will fly by helicopter, and will also, of course, have his famous car, the Beast. They never let anyone else take care of the security around the transport of the president. And we can see here the King also waiting to greet Donald Trump, who will initially be greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Yes.
That's where we'll have the first greeting, and then we'll have a gun salute, and then the Prince and Princess of Wales will escort the American presidential couple to meet the King and Queen.
You mentioned joint initiatives. It is also, and you mentioned security, the U.S. Secret Service coordinating with the British security apparatus for ensuring the president's security and all of this. And so much of the schedule is geared to have him away from the public. We remember the protests of 2019 and certainly the very tense political atmosphere at home. And with that huge rally on the weekend in London, so security very much, even more so, top of mind. I want to bring in Chris Brown, one of our senior international correspondents, who's also in our bureau in London watching this. And Chris, welcome. Thanks for being part of our coverage. You're keeping an eye on Windsor. I just got a briefing, Chris, from the British Armed Forces. It's their media information pack. Gives a lot of information about what we're going to see over the processions. And the wording of this is incredible. This is what it says. It is the largest military ceremonial welcome for a state visit to the UK in living memory. An extra large guard of honor presented to President Trump for inspection. It also says for the first time there will be a joint. It talks about size and grandeur and firsts. And even in the language, it seems very much aiming to appeal at what Donald Trump will like to hear.
Very much so. Lots of hyperbole in there. True or not, it is the kind of superlative language that one has gotten used to hearing when it comes to Donald Trump. What's notable now, of course, is as we watch the helicopter carrying the president coming into land, is that it is a helicopter. This is not a motorcade. We're not seeing streets all around Windsor Castle lined with people waving flags in the United States or Britain, cheering or otherwise. So this just speaks, I think, to the controversy that Donald Trump is flying in with here. He is a very divisive figure here in Britain. Divisive on the left, for sure, and also divisive on the right. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who a former member of a Labour government, a Labour supporter, took a big page in The Guardian today, slamming Trump for his toxic politics and encouraging Britons wherever they are today during Trump's visit to come out and oppose him, to say no to his reactionary politics. And on the one hand, he applauded Keir Starmer for trying to keep Trump on side, but he also said, look, you can't just do that. You also have to make sure that you tell him that we don't agree with a lot of his policies. And we've already heard some of your other guests run them through, from immigration all the way down through Ukraine and Gaza. But on the political right as well, Trump is not necessarily universally embraced. Nigel Farage, who is the leader of Reform UK, who has he's one of Trump's friends. It was one of his big assets, I would say, when he started at Reform UK. He really has not talked about Trump that much, and Reform UK has done all right. It's now #1 in the polls. It's riding a wave of anti-immigration criticism, and so I think even on the political right, Heather, you're going to see some distance keeping.
I found that letter and a piece from the mayor interesting, too. And just for our viewers, Chris, here's one sentence or two from a key paragraph. It's important to ensure our special relationship includes being open and honest with each other. At times, this means being critical friend and speaking truth to power and being clear that we reject the politics of fear and division. So that is what the mayor is saying right now. Again, we're watching Windsor Castle. This is the East Lawn, and we are waiting for the arrival and the touchdown of U.S. President Donald Trump's helicopter. I'm wondering, Chris, I want to just show, Crystal was mentioning earlier that the people were arrested because of the projections on the screen, on the walls of Windsor Castle last night. Pictures of Donald Trump, pictures of Jeffrey Epstein. So that has been an area of scandal as well. This is another sort of fraught issue for Donald Trump as he arrives, and Prince Andrew nowhere part of this royal greeting today or these couple of days of visit. Can you just, the Jeffrey Epstein story and the British ambassador to the U.S., Peter Mandelson, he was dismissed over that particular issue. So U.S. politics being felt there, too.
Very much so. I mean, this is almost a triangle, if you will, between Donald Trump, the royal family, and Keir Starmer's government. Peter Mandelson was a very well-known peer. He was Lord Peter Mandelson, a part of Tony Blair's government, a diplomat, a lobbyist, and at 71 years old, an extensive history of doing deals with the United States. And so he was the guy that Keir Starmer appointed to be the the British ambassador, to try to make these deals happen. And indeed, on this trip, you may be even seeing some of the results of that. This AI partnership, which is the artificial intelligence partnership, which we're going to be hearing a lot about in the next 48 hours. Google's already kicked in some $7 billion. Peter Mandelson was one of the architects of that. But when U.S. lawmakers the other week released a whole trove of documents about Jeffrey Epstein, in it were some letters from Peter Mandelson dating back almost 20 years, 2008, after Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of sex crimes. And you could see that the two of them were quite good friends. I think the world of you was one of the lines that Mr. Mandelson wrote. You should fight for your release. Now, Keir Starmer, this all coming up just days before this visit, had to make a quick move. He claimed he knew none of it when he appointed Mandelson, and so Mandelson got thrown overboard. But it is a problem for Starmer, it's a problem for Trump, and as you mentioned, Prince Andrew, it's also got ties into the royal family as well.
And as I mentioned, Prince Andrew in 2019, the last time President Trump was accorded a state visit, escorted the president through part of his touring. He is very much absent from the itinerary and agenda this time. Chris, if you would, just stay with me and we'll keep an eye on the pictures. The live images now of Marine One landing, and we would expect to see President Trump and Melania, the First Lady, arriving soon. Let's bring in Crystal Gamansing, who is right there at the King Henry VIII gate to Windsor Castle. And not exactly where the helicopter landed, but you must have seen it coming in, and you can certainly tell us what is happening there in the scene. So, Crystal, just bring us up to date.
Yes, Heather, we did. From our position, we were able to see the helicopter carrying U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania, as well as the other accompanying aircraft circle over Windsor Castle. Lots of cameras of people on the streets going to the sky, trying to get a picture of that really impressive scene. And we now have the President of the United States touching down on the estate of Windsor Castle, just waiting and looking at these pictures, waiting for him to step out. We know that he was very excited about this second state visit, the invitation from King Charles. Just the other day, in fact, he described King Charles as an elegant man, that Windsor Castle was one of the most beautiful castles. He was excited to be here and saying it would be a very exciting day. And right there we have the moment where we have the Prince and Princess of Wales greeting U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. They are doing that initial hello, and then they will walk over, greet King Charles. It will be a bit of a long walk, though. There'll be a bit of a slow walk over and have a chat. It's really interesting because at this point, we all want to know, what are they talking about? We know that often the royals keep it very light. The conversation doesn't get too heavy or political. We don't anticipate knowing or being told what those chats were about. That's a relatively guarded secret. When we talk about royal protocol, the officials are not supposed to share those details. But of course, we will be paying attention to royal protocol. Will there be any gaffes?
Well, we'll certainly talk about that when we get to his inspecting the troops, because there was one notable in 2019. But right now, we've just had the moment of greeting, King Charles and Queen Camilla, the handshake as they welcome President Trump, someone who has described the king as a beautiful man, a wonderful man, a close friend, that greeting, and now the other dignitaries who have assembled and who are going to be part of these 2 days of state proceedings. But there is the king, and again, it is a nasty day in Windsor as the leaders, as King Charles and President Trump, get set to go in for a number of events and special lunch ahead of all of the protocol and the state dinner to come, which we'll all talk about. I want to bring in Rafe once again. Rafe, here is the moment. What have you observed? And we always look to the signals of what people are wearing and any symbolism. Symbolism is going to be very significant over the next couple of days. What are you seeing as President Trump arrives there in Windsor?
So we're about 20 to 25 minutes behind schedule, which of course will be causing great angst for those in the kitchens and the military organisers of all this who like things to run like clockwork. But the moment that we saw the president shake the hand of His Majesty the King, that was the signal for gun salutes to be fired by the British Army at Windsor, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, and at the Tower of London, the Honourable Artillery Company, the oldest regiment in the world, also firing its gun salute. And we're now essentially going through the usual, the usual pleasantries you get at the start of one of these trips before that we're going to see them then take a carriage procession through the grounds of Windsor. Now, this is very interesting because normally a carriage procession is designed to take people from A to B. Because of the security concerns and everything else, this is a carriage procession taking people from A back to A again. They're going to essentially be touring around the Windsor estate in this grand ceremonial procession, the largest procession for a state visit. But again, it's also going to be something that the public won't be able to see. When President Macron of France had a state visit very recently, a few months ago, he got a state carriage procession through the streets of Windsor. That wasn't deemed safe enough for President Trump, particularly following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So all of this most splendid of all state visits is taking place very much behind closed doors. But there we can see on the left, we have the massed bands of the Household Cavalry. Now, these are the oldest uniforms worn in the British Army. going back to the 17th century, in fact. And they're going to, of course, provide the carriage for the royal family. This more modern carriage was a gift from the Australians, and it actually has proper suspension and power windows and heating and air conditioning, which is a great improvement given the old bone shakers, which Her late Majesty detested so much.
The bone shakers. Rafe, thank you. Just pause with me for just a second. It is notable, again, for the purposes of keeping this safe and secure and keeping the president away from any sort of outcry or protest, all under very confined and controlled circumstances and settings. So we'll see this carriage procession through the grounds of Windsor. But as Rafe was mentioning, let's just bring you the details. We're not hearing it in the audio feed, but what is going on, 41 rounds of 6 guns from the First World War era on the East Lawn, and that is right there in Windsor, and then simultaneously at the Tower of London by the Honourable Artillery Company. Again, the full measure of pomp and ceremony that we expect with royal occasions. So there is the carriage. And Rafe, do you have, as you look at this, let me just go back to Rafe for just one moment. I do want to bring in Professor Lucas. But Rafe, is this, I don't have any particular information on the carriage they're using this time, but they are all historic and they all have their own very close ties to particular moments in royal history. Is this one that you recognize?
This looks to me like it's the Diamond Jubilee carriage, which is a gift from the Australians in 2012. Could be the Irish state carriage, but I think it's the Diamond Jubilee carriage. As I say, that comes with all of the modern benefits you would want in the 21st century, given that the older carriages weren't the most comfortable. And this, of course, is a carriage we saw at the coronation as well, being used for other members of the royal family. Not an open-air carriage because of the time of year, given the inclement weather as well. You're not getting that open-air carriage. The gun salute is 41 gun salutes in Windsor. 21 is the standard number for a gun salute, plus another 20 because it's a royal park. At the Tower of London, there's a 62 gun salute. Again, 21 standard, plus another 20 because of the royal palace of the Tower, and then another 20 to mark the importance of the ancient city of London. And we just saw the largest of the royal standards flying above the 12th century round tower of Windsor Castle. There's a different size flag for different occasions. Because this is a state visit, the very largest flag of all, the size of a tennis court, is now flying high above Windsor Castle as the procession takes place.
Scott Lucas, Professor Lucas, joining in as you watch what is unfolding here, and the official greeting, Donald Trump and King Charles, and some quiet time and quiet conversation inside that royal carriage. What has caught your attention so far?
Yeah, the Brits know how to put on a show, don't they? I mean, you've had a great description from Rafe and from Crystal about the whole setup that's gone here. And the whole day is going to be like this. There's going to be very little discussion of politics. I doubt King Charles will be pushing any political issues too hard. This whole thing is set up to make Trump feel like he has status, to make him feel like he himself is part of the royal ceremony. Because again, being honest with your viewers, Donald Trump fancies himself as being a king. He's actually said that in the past. He's actually put up tweets with him wearing the crown and wearing the robes. And so he gets to play at being a monarch alongside another monarch that takes place. The rubber hits the road tomorrow. I mean, that's when we'll have the meetings between him and Keir Starmer at Chequers, and we see where the politics goes. And again, your correspondents have gone over that. Whether the party gets spoiled by the Epstein affair, that's going to be an interesting point of view. But the one thing I'd flag up to you right now is that there's a dichotomy here, and I want to see how it plays out today. Donald Trump right now is probably in a very, very good mood. But at 3:30 this morning UK time, Donald Trump was on his social media platform, Truth Social, and he was raging about the U.S. legal system. He was raging about judges. He was raging about the Biden administration. He was saying the whole legal system is stacked against him. And then a few hours later, he was raging about the radical left media in the United States because, of course, he's just sued the New York Times for $15 billion. Which Trump do we get throughout the day? Do we get the Trump who feels comfortable, feels happy, who's in a good mood, who's enjoying all this pageantry? Or do we get the Trump who's just, there's something that will be unsettling him? And that, I think, will be what will sort of set up then tomorrow's more serious discussions.
We may get a bit of an inkling. One of the highlights of the state dinner to come is the speeches that will come from both King Charles and from Donald Trump. And that's something I would imagine, Professor, you'll be listening into closely. Again, that sense of which presidential message he'll want to deliver. What will you be listening to there?
On King Charles' speech, because he has done this in the past. He did it, if I remember correctly, with the state opening of Parliament from the throne just after he took over from his mother. And that is, he made very pointed references to the United Kingdom as an inclusive society, with all people contributing. Now that, of course, is in the context of the long-running issues here, and sometimes the whipped up political division and hatred over immigration, over refugees, over asylum seekers. Now we know that Donald Trump himself can be quite divisive on those issues. Does King Charles make a pointed message for inclusion that applies both to the UK and to the United States? Does he make a pointed reference to the importance of the environment, given, as we know, of course, that Trump is a climate change denier and that he favors the unlimited use of fossil fuels? And then in Trump's response, is there anything that irks him about what King Charles says? Does Trump add his own a bit of needle as well? Does he actually try to whip up the immigration issue? Does he try to feed off of some of the right-wing rhetoric, or does he play it straight down the line, which is, we have an important relationship, the US and the UK, and one of the things to look out for, Trump and his people are distorting the idea of free speech to try to remove regulations on free speech, to try to strip them away. And this is coming only a couple days after Elon Musk, a former Trump ally, told a far-right rally, fight back or die. Does Trump use that distortion of free speech to intervene in UK politics and encourage the right?
To a little bit more about that, Professor, that rally over the weekend and the timing of all of that. But just to come back to these scenes for a moment, thank you, Professor, for now. Again, we're watching the carriage procession within the grounds of Windsor, away from protesters and away from the public, and indeed that long walk, the famous long walk at Windsor. There are still barricades to keep everyone at a safe distance. There's a view to give you the perspective. This is supposed to be about a 15-minute carriage procession around the grounds of Windsor Castle. There are 80 soldiers taking part as the sovereign's escort, and along the route you see various points lined by 22 half companies, so personnel from the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, the British Army, and the Royal Air Force. And here comes the carriage again. This is what Donald Trump and the First Lady are taking in their first moments in Windsor Castle. We were talking with Professor Lucas about what we will hear publicly as they make their speeches at the state dinner. Oh, to be able to listen in privately for the kinds of conversations they're having now within that beautiful royal carriage. Chris Brown joining me as he's watching from our bureau in London. Chris, what do we understand to be the state of the relationship between the king and the president right now?
Well, if you read sort of a selection of British newspapers, Heather, the goal of this visit for Keir Starmer is to do exactly what we're seeing in front of us now. That is, make a great big fuss about Donald Trump, feed him some very good meals, have a good visit to Chequers tomorrow, and then get him on Air Force One and get him back to the United States happy with how things have gone. Keir Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister here, Donald Trump, the Republican President. Starmer is getting credit from a quite broad selection of people here for walking this very thin tightrope that he's had to walk, because there are many, many differences, many things that separate the United States and Great Britain now. We've gone through some of them. Support for Ukraine is a huge one. We saw Vladimir Zelensky call up and almost take Starmer as his bodyguard to meet with Trump in the White House after that big dressing down that he got. So Starmer is used to trying to be this guy in the middle. And as I say, he is getting some credit for it. The tariffs that the Americans put on Britain are 10%. Overall, that's substantially lower than the 15% that got hit onto the European Union. So he's seen so far as deftly managing this relationship, and they do not want that to get upset at all. over the next 48 hours by Epstein or by any other tripwires that come up in terms of the trade relationship.
Are there other issues, Chris? I'm wondering where this could potentially go awry, or what people are particularly on tenterhooks over.
You know, it's interesting. When this visit first came up, when that invitation came from King Charles, I think it was probably a pretty fair guess that this was going to be all about trade, that trade was the #1 issue in the UK, the economy and so forth. But we have seen a little bit of a flipping of priorities. You mentioned that very large protest in the streets of London over the weekend, some 150,000 people coming out, led by far-right figure Tommy Robinson, protesting immigration in Britain. The Reform UK party, many others who are there, calling for mass deportations of people, not just illegal migrants that we've seen coming over on small boats, but also a big cut in legal migration as well. And so that has really almost taken over a lot of the domestic political agenda, pushing some of these trade issues almost aside. And so let's listen and see what Trump says on anything to do with immigration that might fuel, let's say, Starmer's opponents, Reform UK, the Conservative Party, or if Trump does not talk about it. You know, there is an argument to be made that Trump kind of wrote the playbook for tackling the whole issue of immigration. Obviously, with his ICE raids in the United States, we've not seen that here, but certainly many people on the political right would.
Chris, that's very interesting. We'll listen in for comments again, as Professor Lucas was indicating, perhaps at the speeches at the state dinner tonight and that joint news conference with President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer tomorrow. This is a beautiful shot of the arrival of the procession, and I'm going to bring in Rafe on all of this. We have a little bit more information for you on exactly who is traveling where. In the procession, in the first carriage, the King and the President, in the Irish state coach, and then Queen Camilla and First Lady Melania Trump, they're in the Scottish state coach. The third coach is a semi-state Landau model, and that's the Prince and Princess of Wales with the U.S. ambassador and his wife. And then coach 4, there are senior figures in the Trump administration. So that's Marco Rubio, who is there, the Secretary of State, Steve Witkoff, the overseas envoy, who's been really front and center in so many of the foreign policy issues they may well be discussing over the next couple of days. They're in an Ascot Landau coach, and there's a second coach with various senior assistants as well. But looking at these, it just maybe explain to us what we're looking at from the British military standpoint here, Rafe. What are these images?
Yes. So here we see on horseback the splendid sight of the Blues and Royals, the second oldest regiment and most senior regiment in the British Army. They date back to basically the time of King Charles II and the Restoration. And behind them, we have the carriages processed by the Life Guards, which is the senior regiment of the British Army. The Blues and Royals have the red plumes, the Life Guards have the white plumes, and they form the bodyguard to the sovereign on horseback. And they're flanked on either side by members of the army, forming the third flank of the processional route, members of the Irish Guards and others. And they are essentially taking part in a scene we've never had before. We've never seen this sort of a thing happening at Windsor Castle. There has been a state visit before to Windsor Castle with President Macron and also with Lech Wałęsa in 1991, but nothing like this has ever taken place here. Buckingham Palace is currently undergoing major refurbishment, which is why the state banquet and other ceremonial aspects aren't taking place at the palace. They're taking place at Windsor Castle. On the left, we see the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. They are the ceremonial troop of the British Army who perform all of the gun salutes, as I think we now see the royal carriage going through the George IV gate into the quadrangle of Windsor Castle, which is the world's largest and oldest inhabited castle. Its foundations go back to William the Conqueror.
Could I just interrupt for just a second? We'd like to pause for the anthem, so let's just listen and I'll be back to you in a second. So, listening there to the massed band of the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, and the Scots Guards performing the U.S. national anthem and the UK national anthem, an abbreviated version, as the carriage arrives and halts at the Royal Dais. And that is where we are going to see the special guests, King Charles and Queen Camilla, and U.S. President Trump and Melania take their places there. And we'll listen in for various commands. We are seeing them do so as they are getting set for an inspection of the Guard. And it's interesting, Rafe, as I was noting in talking to Chris Brown, the military, in laying out what is going to unfold today, has been really layering on the hyperbole. They're talking about an extra large guard of honor presented to Donald Trump, to President Trump, for inspection. So this will be even more elaborate than is usual, and this is always an elaborate part of the protocol as well.
Yes, well, we know that the president does like adjectives like the greatest and the biggest and the best, and certainly we have given him the greatest and the biggest and the best in terms of state visits. As you can see here, there are many firsts taking place over the course of the state visit. The first combined flypast of the Royal Air Force and the American Air Force, for example, the incorporation of American military in the changing of the Guard. Here we can see the Prince and Princess of Wales arriving up to the dais as well, shortly before the King and the President will inspect the Guard, as happened in 2019, you may remember, when Donald Trump and Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II inspected the Guard, some controversially suggesting perhaps that Donald Trump may have walked a bit too far ahead of the Queen at that time. We'll see in what position he walks on this occasion as the carriages process out of sight. The King and the President will be inspecting 3 of the Guards units, 3 of the Guards regiments. Of the 5 in total, there'll be the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, and the Scots Guards, all of whom we can see here assembled in the great quadrangle of Windsor Castle.
And just again, if you would, Rafe, just pause with me.
The Guard of Honour of the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, and the Scots Guards are present and awaiting your inspection.
If you could hear that, well, that's Lieutenant Colonel Green inviting the President to inspect the Guard. The exact statement, Mr. President, the Guard of Honour of the Grenadier Guards, Coldstream Guards, and Scots Guards are present and ready for your inspection. And that is underway for U.S. President Trump and again for King Charles, someone he has heralded as a close friend and very much enthusiastic in accepting his invitation to this unprecedented second state visit. No elected leader has ever been accorded this honor. And as we've been talking, King Charles has hosted 5 state visits prior. This is his 6th. Queen, somewhere around 112 or 113, the number differed in terms of what I was reading about, but more than 110 over her long reign. But they are rare, only a couple of a year. And as we bring in Rafe, and we'll talk about this inspection and the Guard of Honor in a moment, but the state visit itself, Rafe, it's a rare opportunity, but it is a blending of both pageantry and diplomacy. And just talk about how it's been used historically.
Yes, so state visits are a combination of pageantry and of politics. Today, of course, we have all the pageantry at Windsor Castle. Tomorrow, the politics will take place when the president travels to Chequers, which is the country retreat of the Prime Minister, for serious, hard-nosed negotiations. In fact, it's worth noting that there have only really been 4 presidential state visits in history. There have been 42 presidential visits to the UK, but almost none of them were official state visits. Not even Ronald Reagan got a state visit. Barack Obama and Bill Clinton had their state visits, but this is actually half of the state visits ever given to American presidents have been accorded to Donald Trump, who is now, as we see, inspecting the Royal Guard. And there we see the state colours of the 3 regiments. The state colours are the grandest colours, the grandest standards bearing all the battle honours of each regiment. And they're only actually brought out on these very, very special occasions. And they're not easy to hold. I know some chaps in the army, and these things are extremely heavy, especially on an unpleasant windy day as we see today.
And Rafe, I think you told us earlier it was George W. Bush who got the state visit as well. I think it was Bush and Obama, and
yes,
now
sorry,
sorry. You said Clinton, and I just wanted everyone to, because you're encyclopedic, and I wanted to make sure we were correct in all of that. But watching this, you mentioned earlier, not to dwell on a point, because certainly Donald Trump's people and the palace said there was no breach of protocol. But in 2019, on Donald Trump's first ever state visit, all of the world was talking about this video. So let's just remind you of what happened in 2019. You see it on the left. Of course, the Queen is to be leading things, and indeed, he completely sort of obliterated her, didn't he, Rafe? Blocked her out. She had to maneuver around him to come up alongside, and people thought that was a huge faux pas and breach of protocol. Did it turn out to be in the end?
No, well, as you can see here, of course, once again, President Trump is taking the lead on His Majesty, and that's because the King is accompanying the President. So it's the President who is doing the inspecting, and the King is accompanying him. Of course, President Trump perhaps did block Her late Majesty a bit too much on the last visit, but I think here he's been, I suppose, well advised that he's keeping just the right sort of space that he should be. And of course, here we see the red plumes in the bearskin hat, which is a symbol of the Grenadier Guards. If you want to know how to distinguish between the guards on display, the Grenadier Guards have red plumes and single buttons going down. The Coldstream Guards have white plumes and 2 pairs of buttons going down. And the Scott Guards have no plumes and 3 buttons going down their tunics, which is how you tell them. Of course, very similar to the uniforms of the Governor General's Foot Guards, who performed the changing of the guard ceremony on Parliament Hill in Ottawa.
Rafe, thank you so very much. I'm happy to have had time with you. I understand you have some prior commitments, so have to leave us, but you've given us, as always, your incredible expertise, and I appreciate it. We'll look forward to the next occasion. You see the carriage is being taken in to Windsor Castle, and again, this beautiful shot of the grandeur of this fortress and residence dating back 900 years. One of the things that's going to transpire a little bit later on today, and it'll be away from the cameras, but of course we think of Queen Elizabeth living there and the final stage of her funeral when she was laid to rest there at St. George's Chapel, and President Trump will be paying tribute to her privately in the chapel as part of his itinerary over these 2 days. This is a bit of good news. Rafe, you've extended your time with me. We have 10 more minutes of Rafe, for which I'm grateful. So I'll use you to maximum effect here as we understand the protocol. What are the next stages we're going to be watching for?
Yes, I'm going down to Windsor straight after this.
Is that right? To do broadcasting
yes.
from there. Not an invited guest at the state dinner, Rafe. I'm not sure about that. You might be.
Yes, here we have the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. So this used to be a mechanized branch of the British Army. And then the King decided, when of course technology surpassed their cannons, which are World War I cannons, that they would perform a ceremonial function purely. King George VI gave them the name the King's Troop. And when Queen Elizabeth took over, she decided they should remain known as the King's Troop. So whatever gender of the sovereign, they remain the King's Troop. They perform all of the ceremonial gun salutes normally held in Hyde Park and the royal parks of London. But they're all here today, present in Windsor Castle. As here we see the Blues and Royals again. There are 80 of these soldiers taking part in the procession, but many more, of course, forming up part of the Guard of Honour in the quadrangle here.
Again, we'll watch this as it unfolds. These are scenes that we have certainly witnessed previously on royal occasions. But Rafe, I'm wondering, while I still have you, something we're going to see later on today, I wonder if you could set the stage for that. It's the beating retreat, which has never been seen in this sort of context. It's the first time beating retreat has been performed at a state visit. So that is something, again, that will be of note to President Trump. But what will we see as part of that, and what is the history of the beating retreat?
Beating the retreat ceremony dates back centuries, in fact. It's a very ancient way in which, historically, you would be able to summon your troops back into their camp. They would lower the flags, and you would lock up the camp, and you would bring everyone back home. The ceremony is still performed twice a year in central London in Horse Guards Parade, which is where the Sovereign's annual birthday parade takes place, trooping the colour. And the beating the retreat ceremony is held there in June on 2 consecutive nights. But yes, again, trying to show President Trump the greatest and the best state visit ever, they decided to incorporate this completely unrelated ceremony into part of the ceremonial of the state visit.
With British and U.S. musicians participating in all of that. So that will be a first to watch for. And for you as well, we'll see a joint fly past. Those are always spectacular. There's such huge crowd pleasers, although in this particular context, the crowd is not there. It's very much being kept away. But the fly past, where again we will see British and American aircraft, F-35 fighter jets, as well as the Red Arrow. So again, in all of the symbolism, this is going to be just rife with symbolism over these next couple of days, won't it be?
Yes, and in fact, there's a very deliberate message going out here in terms of the incorporation of the American military into this state visit. We know that President Trump has been telling Europe to increase its defense spending and to increase its NATO contributions. And and of course, there's a lot of worry now in Europe about how much they can rely on the Americans. This is a way of saying to Americans, look, we, Britain, we are your main ally. There are more, there are 11,000 American troops on British soil. And the British military is designed to work seamlessly with the American military. And there's no greater evidence of that than actually having a combined fly past of 4 F-35s, 2 flown by RAF pilots and 2 flown from American pilots from the American military base at Lakenheath in England, taking part in that, again to symbolize that coordination and that unity. We've never seen that taking place before. Also, of course, having the military as part of this Guard of Honour, we have American regiments also present in the quadrangle today. And indeed, the American military will be taking part in the changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace. All are not so subtle as a symbol of the importance of the Anglo-American unity in military endeavours.
Ray, thank you very much. I will say goodbye this time, and I appreciate it. We'll watch for you on future broadcasts. Let's just pause together and enjoy the bands as they march by the distinguished guests. Chris Brown. I'm glad we paused for that. Pretty sure that was John Philip Sousa, Chris. So again, full symbolism for the U.S. president as he is there in Windsor Castle, inspecting the guard and taking in all the pageantry. Listening in and watching as you have been, I'll get your perspective in a second, but some of the reporters who were there able to pick up some of the exchanges between the king and President Trump, talking about how they have been, smiling and seemingly very friendly with each other, and how he's obviously enjoying taking in this tremendous spectacle, standing on that raised platform and taking in this famous British pageantry and very much delighting in that. What are you seeing so far this morning in the early minutes of the president's state visit?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of assessments every hour or so on this, and as long as, from a British point of view, the assessment is so far so good, which I would say is the way it looks, they're probably very pleased. You hear frequently from people who deal with Donald Trump that often the last person to speak to him seems to carry the most weight. And so they will hope that, as Professor Lucas said, that when he got up this morning at 3:30 and was scribbling things in his Trump social account, that all of this has put a smile on his face and left him in a far better mood than what he was in the middle of the night. But it's notable, today is a very big day for Donald Trump back in the United States. The U.S. Federal Reserve will make an important announcement about an interest rate cut. And Donald Trump, as we know, has been pushing very hard for the Fed to make a very large interest rate cut to 0.5%. Will he get what he wants? Will it be less than that? It seems likely, reading the tea leaves, he's going to get some kind of a cut, but will it be as big as he wants? And so likely lunch is going to go all right, because that decision by the Fed does not come out until after lunch. But it's dinner time, I would say, if you're the British, that you're worried about, because you don't want Trump to not get what he wants. And then to affect the rest of the dinner and the agenda, Heather.
So just pause with me for a second. I'll bring people up to date. So they're leaving the platform, leaving the quadrangle of Windsor Castle. We're as far as the military, they've marched past, headed through the George IV gate onto the long walk outside the castle as the Trumps and the royal family then into Windsor Castle. And as Chris mentioned, there will be a lunch. I don't know if this is another nod, of course, to Donald Trump, who always talks about his Scottish mother, but some beautiful bagpipes as he was exiting into the castle for a lunch inside the state dining room. They're also going to have a tour of a special collection, the royal collection. They have isolated and placed on display some items related to the United States. So in the green drawing room of Windsor Castle, that is one of the next events on the program when the Trumps will be able to inspect those particular U.S. items. And Chris, we're running considerably late, obviously, because of the late arrival of Donald Trump. And I think perhaps the weather might have been a factor in all of that. But as you said, so far so good in this first hour or so together. Just look, if you will, Chris, I think this is the last time I'm going to be able to talk to you this morning. What are the British interests in this visit, and why has Donald Trump been invited back for this unprecedented second state visit?
Well, the U.S. Economic relationship with Britain is extremely important. It is the most important trade relationship that Britain has. 18% of everything they make here goes over to the United States, and Trump has so far given Britain a better deal than he has other countries. The tariffs that he's imposed on many British goods are 10%. That's lower, for example, than what he's imposed on the European Union. And so Keir Starmer is getting some credit from both sides of the political spectrum for trying to walk, as I said, this tightrope, keep Trump on side, express disagreements with the things they disagree on, but perhaps not super forcefully. And by that, I'm talking about things such as the U.S. position vis-a-vis Gaza and so forth. And so then tomorrow, after the Happy Meals and all of this pomp and ceremony is done, that's when the details are going to get done in terms of any movement on trade. We know that Trump has brought along with him some of the world's top CEOs from some of the biggest companies in the world. They've already been spending money and making announcements, even as we've been watching this go by. NVIDIA, the world's big AI power, they've made an announcement. Google is spending close to $7.8 billion in Britain. And so if these announcements keep coming, and the expectation is there is more of that to come, then the British will be very happy, and they will feel that whatever controversy, whatever criticism they've had, whatever they may yet see on the streets today, because there are expected to be some fairly sizable protests in London, it will be worth it if, on the economic front, Britain can walk away with some wins.
Chris, thank you. I really appreciate your sharing this hour with me and with us and your analysis. So we will await your reporting as the day goes on. Chris Brown from our bureau in London. And we look live at Windsor Castle. Of course, the Royal Standard is flying. The King is there, along with Queen Camilla and President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, as they are beginning what will be a state lunch ahead of the big state dinner and banquet tonight. Professor Scott Lucas has been with me throughout, and you are a good soul to stay through the whole hour and watch what has been transpiring there at Windsor Castle. I'm wondering, a couple of questions for you, Professor, to conclude our coverage. As you've seen things, so much symbolism, obviously very personal nods to President Trump in the greeting and the welcome and some of the scenes that we've seen there in the quad of Windsor Castle. How would you assess how things have gone in these first minutes?
Oh, I think Chris nailed it very, very well, which is that the British wanted to put Donald Trump into the area where he feels special, he feels exalted, he feels this is all for him. And they've done it very well. Just to give your viewers a flashback as to where this all started, in 2017, when Trump was taking pot shots at everyone across Europe, and it was very chaotic, the French did this. The French did this with Bastille Day, if you might remember, when they invited Trump over and they gave him the military. They gave him, the gun salutes. They gave him the fly past. What the French couldn't give him was the monarchy for obvious historic reasons. And that's what the British have added on top. I think the combination of this spectacle plus what you've heard from Chris about the headlines on the tech and the AI investment, NVIDIA, 11 billion, Google, 7 billion, Microsoft, 22 billion. It means the UK can put a happy spin on this, although I emphasize it doesn't resolve the issues around immigration. It doesn't resolve the issues around tariffs, and that there isn't a UK-US trade deal yet. And I got to be honest with you here, it doesn't resolve the economic issues on both sides of the Atlantic, especially as the UK is still struggling post-Brexit.
But might it help? I mean, that's the whole thinking here, in the flatter Trump strategy, which Keir Starmer and which the UK seems to have mastered or is really seeking to master. This is really reaching its apex here with the state visit. Might it prove effective?
It does for now, Heather, but the question is for how long? And again, I've got to make 2 points. The deal hasn't been sealed over tariffs. There isn't a trade deal to lock down that U.S. level. There isn't a firm deal to lock down a U.S. commitment yet to European and Ukraine security, although things are moving in the right direction. And Trump can shift very quickly. So just to give you a parallel with a much different leader, back at the start of the year, the Indians courted Donald Trump. They courted him very well because they wanted a trade deal with the United States. They wanted a very close relationship where they were the prime U.S. partner in the region. That was in February, and things went well for 2 months. But then India did not thank Trump for supposedly ending their conflict with Pakistan. Pakistan did. Trump turned against India at that point. And where are we now? The Trump administration has imposed 50% tariffs on India. There is no trade deal, and India is no longer Trump's best buddy in Asia. So the UK has to keep doing this. And how long do you have to keep doing this for with Trump? Every single day.
Professor Scott Lucas joining us. I really appreciate your expertise this morning, as always, and thank you for sharing in this special coverage, a little extended, and I appreciate your staying with us longer because of the delayed start and, in some ways, the prolonged ceremonial aspects to all of that. The big welcome for the Trumps at Windsor Castle, and again, as we look live at the Tower and the Royal Standard as it flies. We can say good morning to you. This is CBC Morning Live, and you've been watching this extended coverage of the two-day state visit for U.S. President Trump as it gets underway at Windsor. I'm Heather Hiscox, and yes, we've had Chris Brown and Professor Lucas and our royal commentator and experts, but we also have, just outside the King Henry VIII gate, our reporter Crystal Gamansing, who was there and paying attention closer than we have been. So how has it gone? What have we seen so far as this gets underway, Crystal?
Well, Heather, we were just hearing from Professor Lucas talking about the continuous wooing of U.S. President Donald Trump by the U.K. That's the reason for this unprecedented second state visit for the American president. We saw the carriages, we saw the handshakes, we saw the largest military participation in any state visit in recent memory, and that is all in an effort to impress the United States, to hopefully build on that what we call out here often, and it's often said, that special relationship. When we talk about Brexit, when we talk about the situation the UK is in right now, the United Kingdom needs the United States. There are security ties that need to be maintained. There are all of those economic benefits that we have heard both Professor talking about as well as Chris in our studios in London. But there is also this need to keep the United States on side for different international causes that are very close to the Labour government and people here in the UK. Not far from where I am, Heather, we can see a Palestinian flag, I can see an Israeli flag and a couple of signs. They are working very hard to keep things locked down. There's a lot of police around here, and it's one of the reasons why we're seeing all of today's events take place within the castle grounds, so it can be controlled. But there are so many international issues that the UK and its allies, including Ukraine, for example, need the United States to participate in. So that all comes into play. It's why we see the second state visit. It's why for the first time ever, later on this afternoon, we will see a fly pass of the castle here with UK and US planes taking place. Right now, they are having some lunch. They are relaxing a little bit. It will be a very long day. But people here in Windsor are very aware of how this state visit feels compared to other ones. I spoke to one woman who is from Windsor. Her name is Anne Jones, and she said if you just compare this visit to the one with French President Emmanuel Macron, it's very different.
We had President Macron here a few weeks ago, didn't we, Barbara? Yeah. And the French flags were up just like, we've got here now. He went through the town. This guy can't come through the town, can he?
Yeah, they're keeping him inside the castle on the estate.
And that says a lot, doesn't it?
So those two ladies out early this morning, they said they didn't come for a walk because they wanted to see any of the festivities. They said on every Wednesday they meet up with some friends down at a coffee shop, and they were actually being discouraged to go today, saying it's going to be too busy, there's going to be too many roads blocked off. And they said, no, it's okay, we could get around totally fine. But they had no interest in sticking around to see anything, to see if they could get a glimpse of the U.S. president or any of his aircraft over top of Windsor Castle. So there is a sense here by many that he is not welcome and that they don't trust that he will, in fact, make good on any promises or suggestions for benefits between the UK and the U.S. when it comes to economic projects, Heather.
Because, as you would suggest, for some he's not welcome here. That certainly was the situation on his first state visit. Huge protests back in 2019, and to avoid those similar situations playing out, there's very tight security, and as you've indicated, everything is contained and well removed from large numbers of people. What are you seeing, though, because there are still protests sparking up?
Yeah, there was a very large protest here in Windsor last evening, and Windsor ambassadors are walking around trying to keep an eye out for anybody who might try to spark a disturbance of any kind. Right now it is very peaceful. Like I mentioned, a couple of flags with people holding them out on the street, but we haven't seen anything else. Earlier, part of that other protest last night, we did see 4 individuals taken into custody. They're believed to have been related to images, very large images of the U.S. president and the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein being projected onto the walls of Windsor Castle. So security is tight. There are concerns that something like that might happen again. Major protest planned for London. But we did speak to a spokesperson for the Stop Trump coalition, and they say even if the U.S. president doesn't see them in person, he will hear about the protests, and they say it will affect him.
It makes a huge difference when masses of people come out onto the streets and say that they hate Trump, that Trump is not welcome. Last time, it really got on Trump's nerves. He's a really egotistic maniac, right? Our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, can see that we don't like him because people are not going to vote for Labour and this and that government in the next election if Keir Starmer continues humiliating us by acting like a human carpet and licking Trump's boots.
So that really does, Heather, give you an impression of the balance that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has to straddle here between impressing Donald Trump, keeping him on side, hoping to get better tariff rates, hoping to get some deals when it comes to new science, technology, and even energy infrastructure, but also not going too far so that he loses the respect of the electorate.
Crystal, thank you so much. We will check back with you over the day. Crystal Gamansing is there outside one of the gates to Windsor Castle. And again, just to wrap up what we've seen so far this morning, some of the pageantry, will show you some of the highlights, the arrival, the carriage rides, the honor guards. There is a banquet to come. Right now, as Crystal's mentioned, the luncheon, fly past, and this beating retreat ceremony for the first time ever at a state visit. We'll see that all. And we'll be paying close attention with our reporters and with our experts over the next couple of days to see whether the king is successful in exerting his soft power and perhaps having any influence over President Trump on issues that are close to him. Keir Starmer, the meeting tomorrow at Chequers, the summer retreat, and all of the issues that they will be discussing, Ukraine chief among them, as Keir Starmer leads the coalition of the willing, in which Canada participates. But struck by the writing today that Chris Brown mentioned earlier in The Guardian, a piece that the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, wrote, urging the king, urging the Prime Minister, British officials to pay attention in that special relationship Crystal mentioned, to be open and honest, a critical friend, and speak truth to power, and be clear that in the UK they reject the politics of fear and division. That is the entreaty from London's mayor as the U.S. president arrives in the country. Much more coverage of that to come on CBC News Network. Now, while the president is in the UK, the country is also setting the stage for renegotiating the free trade deal for